For the last couple of years, Honor has been making some of the best mid-range handsets on the market, and today I have teamed up with xdadevelopers.com to bring you a review of the new Honor 9. The Honor 9 is the latest installment of Huawei's more budget line of smartphones which are rebranded under the Honor name. And when I say budget, I don't mean that they particularly skimp on specs, merely that on price you can always get an Honor phone for a lot less than other regular flagships. And this is a good £150 less than other flagship offerings, although it should be noted that at the moment the G6 is on sale, so actually this is comparable to a G6 in price. And that comparison actually goes over into the design. There's obviously a lot of cues going on from the iPhone, and there's some aspects of Samsung in Honor's design, but there is also definitely something of the G6. And whilst there are elements of the G6 in the sides and in the front, when you look at the back of this phone, it looks much more like a Samsung. That's because Honor have used this really nice reflective curved glass panel, so it makes this kind of iridescent mirror which will reflect whatever is around it. It's really lovely to hold in the hand, although if there was two complaints, I would say it's incredibly slippy and it also is scratched up really easily. All that being said, I really do love the design, and the 5.1 inch screen fits really nicely in the palm of your hand. One of the biggest smartphone design trends of this year is going bezel-less. And this is something that Samsung, Essential, LG and even probably Apple have put a lot of money behind. Honor have kept it simpler with a much more traditional bezel setup, so you've got your fingerprint scanner right below the screen on this kind of virtual home button. And this is virtual, this is capacitive rather than clicky, and I definitely prefer that. It makes the whole thing feel a little bit sleeker. And by not having a clicky button, it also means that Honor have been able to implement different gesture commands into the home button to replace the soft keys. And this actually works really well, and it's a feature that I've missed when I've gone back to the G6 or the S8. The Honor 9 has a 5-inch 1080 by 1920 pixel display. It's an IPS display, so it doesn't quite have the saturation and contrast that you'll get on an AMOLED display, but it does have slightly more realistic colour representation. It's a good screen. Most smartphone displays these days are pretty decent, and this falls within the top end of that. One thing that I have really enjoyed is the return to a 16:9 aspect ratio. There is definitely a place for weird and wacky aspect ratios. Consuming certain types of media is definitely more immersive. However, there's just not enough content for them yet, and apps don't really scale properly, and there is a certain polish that comes with returning to the more traditional setup. In terms of software, the Honor 9 is running Emotion UI, and this is a fairly unintrusive skin that runs on top of Android 7.1. I'm not a huge fan of the default home screen. It's got the iPhone style going on where all of your installed apps are simply on your home screen and you don't get an app list. That being said, it's fairly customizable, and there's a couple of neat little features like the ability to blur your wallpaper to varying degrees right from your home screen app. However, as per normal, I've obviously just replaced this with Nova Launcher. The rest of the software is fairly unintrusive, and it has lots of the little tweaks that are becoming common in good Android smartphones this year. You've got a whole slew of extra power controls and things like scrolling screenshot capture. So next we come to performance. The Honor 9 is running on a Kirin chipset, and this has 6GB of RAM, which is bizarre because nowadays a mid-range phone has 6GB of RAM. The Pixel doesn't have 6GB of RAM. This doesn't make sense. And interestingly, the Honor 9 comes with two different versions. One of these versions has the standard octa-core processor with 4GB of RAM, and the other one has the standard octa-core processor with 6GB of RAM. Now, some benchmarks showed that the 6GB version absolutely destroyed the Galaxy S8 in speed tests. Speed tests don't always replicate real-world experience. However, I have got the 6GB version of the Honor 9, and I have to say it is blisteringly fast. This feels incredibly fast. It is definitely faster than the Galaxy S8 in everyday use, and that is one of the main issues of the S8, is that it really starts to feel a little bit sluggish. But I'm going to be doing my full S8 review in the coming weeks. Going back to the Pixel, this feels very similar to that in terms of performance, and very similar to the OnePlus 5. Two areas where you really notice the speed is opening, closing and using the camera. I haven't experienced any frame rate drops or lag when I'm using the camera, and the second area where you really notice this speed is on the fingerprint scanner. This is one of the best fingerprint scanners that I've used on a phone, and I think that's partly because it's on the front, so it's much easier to access, but I also think that the chipset and the software running inside are doing something to help speed it up. The battery life of the Honor 9 is good, and that's really all you can expect from smartphone batteries at the moment. Either it's bad to the point where you actually notice it, or you don't really notice it, you charge it every so often and it seems to last a day, maybe a day and a half, and it is in this latter category that the Honor 9 belongs. It obviously depends on your charging habits. It is aided by having quick charge, and I forget exactly how long Honor say it takes to charge up to full, but it's pretty quick. It's up there with most other quick charging of 2017. One thing it doesn't have is wireless charging, and that's probably not a deal breaker for many people. I like wireless charging if it's there. If it's not there, I just use the wire. And then finally we come to the camera on the Honor 9, and this is an interesting one. It's basically the same as the camera on the Huawei P10, except it doesn't have any of the optics from Leica. So you've got a dual setup with a 20 megapixel monochrome lens and a 12 megapixel regular lens. This is supposed to allow you to do this hybrid zoom, which captures more information. It kind of does, however I think they've missed a trick in having a dual camera setup and using one of the lenses to go monochromatic. And I think you can do more with a dual camera setup, like the portrait mode on the iPhone 7 Plus, although saying that, you can replicate that in software. The Pixel does that very well. But I think more interestingly, they could have put a wide angle lens like the G6 on this, and that would have made me much more excited for this camera. And the final two features of the Honor 9 are the IR blaster and the bloatware. We're going to start with the good one. The IR blaster lets you control your TV, and this is a feature that I never appreciated until last week when I lost the remote to a TV at work. We couldn't control it, we had a presentation to do. I was able to just pull my phone out. You can set this up in a couple of clicks and control your TV. It's simple, it works really well, and I think more smartphones should incorporate it. And the final thing to mention is the bloatware. And Honor, what are you doing, guys? You've got pre-installed games. You've got an Assassin's Creed game from like 2014. It's completely unnecessary. I can understand including your own services. Get people to use those instead of Google, fine. The minute where you have loads of pre-installed games that aren't actually pre-installed, that you need to open and then fully install, it just looks like advertising. It's not very, at least put good games on it is all I can say. But the bloatware you can obviously just uninstall, but it's a little bit irritating and a little bit of a kick in the teeth to spend an amount of money on something and then feel like they're just throwing things at you that you didn't ask for. So if you're looking for a good mid-range smartphone, I would highly suggest the Honor 9. It's mid-range price, but it really does feel like top-end specs. So unless you really need that screen or you're going to be using it all the time for photographs, then I think the Honor 9 is a really good fit. Thank you very much for watching. You can follow me on all my social media whatnots with the links in the description. And thank you very much to XDA developers for sending me the Honor 9 for review. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.